Those of you out there that say your studio space is too small, well, this video is for you. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I create two dramatically different fashion looks in a very small studio space. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. I have so many different tutorials on fashion photography and creative lighting, but often I hear photographers say, I can't do that. I only have a tiny studio space, my living room or an extra bedroom. Well, guess what? Today, I'm going to show you how a small space can work for you. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to show you how to achieve two dramatically different aesthetics, one with hard light that's dramatic and sculpted and another that's softer and more glowing. I'm going to show you how I achieve it in a very small space. Now, here's the thing. Shooting fashion and creative work is definitely easier in a larger space. It's true, you have a lot more flexibility, but you gotta work with what you got, and you have to do a little bit of problem solving, so I'm gonna help you out today. So first and foremost, you have to consider the restrictions, some of the constraints you have in a small space. First of all, you're not going to be able to use big modifiers. A 5-foot Octa box is a no-go. So if you want really soft light, instead, could you maybe bounce the light off the walls in the space? Or maybe you avoid soft light altogether and you go for harder light or more concentrated light that involves smaller modifiers. I'm going to show you how to achieve both of these aesthetics and work in the constraints that we have here. Now, speaking of constraints, I measured the space, and from side to side, I have 9 feet across. From the front of the room to the back of the room is 14 feet. And then to the light that I have hanging in the center is just over 7 feet. So everything that I do is going to be in that confined space. So that is certainly not something I would consider to be a large shooting area. Now, one thing that does help is in an instance like this. If I want to end up shooting something full length, it helps for me to be able to step outside the space so I can back up and zoom in and achieve more pleasing compression. It doesn't mean I couldn't shoot, full length shots if I'm in that room, but do know if you've got more depth to work with, absolutely make use of it. Even if that means shooting from your living room by stepping into the hallway and giving yourself those extra few feet of distance. By the way, the space that we're using here, this is actually an office. We often use it as a wardrobe room. This is a space in my studio, and it's got a lot. Usually there's a lot of furniture. I kind of move some of that out. I've got cabinets on the side. There's things hanging on the wall, but it's going to work. All I need is a blank space that I can bring to life with light. All right, so we're going to begin with our first look. We're going to do something a little bit more dramatic. I want to create slices of light. Instead of having the light go everywhere, which is hard to control in a small space, I'm going to use pockets of light. Everything is going to be a little bit more concentrated. So what we have tucked away to the left-hand side of the frame is a Westcott optical spot. On this, I'm using the 50mm lens, and I'm going to create a slice of light. That is going to be the main illumination on our subject. By tucking it off to the left-hand side, we're able to take the highlight, focus it on the subject, and if there's any shadow of the subject on the background, it's actually going to be kicked out of the frame. So that's one way we're going to be able to work in a smaller space. So let's take a look at our first light. And by the way, we're using a Profoto Pro D3. As you can see here, the result is a tight slice of light down the subject and then just a pure black shadow. What that means is I can start to light different parts of the frame to bring it to life. Now, for your main light, like I said, I'm using the optical spot, but you could use other modifiers. The key is to make sure that they're relatively concentrated and not just spreading light everywhere, especially if you want this sculpted look. So you could use a grid, maybe something like a beauty dish with a grid might even work to give you a little bit more of that controlled light. So light number one, main light, something tight, hard slices on the face like you see here. So now, next up, the subject obviously is just blending in with the background. You can see behind me, we've chosen a canary yellow in order to flatter the colors on her clothing. Well, right now it's just going to pure black. So I either need to light the background or add a fill light to the entire space. Or what I'm going to do is both. So next up, I am going to use one of my favorite tricks as a fill light in a small space like this, which is just bouncing the light in the room. If I wanted to add a fill light that was a soft modifier, I'd have to do something like a large umbrella in order to not have a super dramatic shadow on the background. But there's no way a large umbrella would fit here. So my go-to is, as long as there are white walls, bounce it into the corner of the room. And that's what you'll see over here on the right-hand side. Tucked over here behind the wall, the light is just pointed into the corner. And what that's going to do is going to bounce everywhere, I'll have it really low power, and it will just give light to the shadows and also a little bit more illumination to the background. So let's turn on light number 2. If I only had 2 lights, I totally think this could work because there's enough detail in the shadows. You can see the background, she's separated out. But I really do think I could make this a little more dramatic with maybe a little bit of glow. So if I had a bit more space to the sides of my room, maybe not just the 9-4, maybe there wasn't the cabinet over here on the right, what I could do is I could take a light off to the side, maybe add a grid to it, something that would concentrate the light, and point it behind the subject. However, I'm really limited on space, so instead what our solution is we've hidden our background light directly behind the model. Now, if the model is wearing a gown or a larger dress, you can actually hide that light completely behind them. Or even if you see a little bit of the stand, you could Photoshop that out. Something like that is going to allow you to create a glow behind the subject without having to add another light to the sides. So what we have here is on a floor stand behind my subject, I have another strobe. And this strobe is just meant to create a little bit of glow and a little bit of separation. Now in this shot, I cropped just above the feet. I could definitely shoot full length, but if I shoot full length with this dress, I may have to just do a little bit of Photoshop to get rid of the stand. So let me show you what it looks like when I add my third and final light behind the subject. Now I don't think that this third light is necessary, but I do think it adds a little bit more depth, looks a little more dramatic, it's a little bit more glowing. So I think it adds quite a bit to the photo. But this shot is dramatic, it's sculpted, it's colorful, it's gonna be a beautiful fashion image, and it is done in a very compact space. But I had to play around with my angles, I had to choose certain modifiers, whether it was creating slices of light or bouncing the fill light or hiding a light behind the subject. All of these are problem solving to work in a small space. So for our first setup, I love what we have to start with. Let's go get the shot. All right, so we are totally flipping the script, going a totally different direction by using soft light. And so my go-to, like I mentioned, is just to bounce the light. When you bounce the light into white walls or light colored walls, what it does is it bounces off the wall, off the ceiling, off the other wall, and it just kind of wraps all the way around the subject, and it gives you a soft quality of light. The larger the light source is, relative to the size of the subject, the softer the light, well, the light source is the wall, and therefore it's going to be rather large. Just a couple of things to consider is that the angle of your light will make a difference. If you point it straight up to the ceiling, it's going to be a top-down light. If you point it to the wall to the left-hand side of the frame, it's going to have some directionality. If it's really close to the wall, it's going to be a harder quality of light because you've made that light source appear smaller because you're lighting a smaller part of the wall. If you back it up and allow that light to spread out more, it's going to be a softer light. So even though I'm saying bounce the light, it's going to be soft, it does matter the directionality and the distance. So play around with it a little bit, take a look at your shots, make sure it's giving you what you're looking for. So for this shot, I'm not going to have to do much of anything. And you can see over the left-hand side of the frame, I have the light pointed into the corner and slightly up. So what that's going to do is going to give us a directionality of light from the left-hand side of the frame, but it's going to be high enough up that it carves her cheekbones and jawline. Now, I mentioned that my ceilings were low. Well, the ceilings here are actually pretty high. We just have a cap of the 7 or 7.5 feet with the light that's hanging there. And so the higher ceilings will make a difference to the direction of light when I'm bouncing it off the ceiling. If you have low ceilings, once again, it might not be practical to bounce it. So again, every space is going to be different. Be sure to experiment to see what's giving you a flattering quality of light on the face. All right, so we've switched up the scene. Our subject has changed the color of her clothing, and we've also changed the color of the background. Here we're using the Savage Universal Blue Mist, and we're picking up the details on the corner of her makeup. And so I want something that's soft but saturated. That's what I'm looking for. Previous shot, we went dramatic, contrasty. Now I want something a little bit softer. So let me show you what the one light gives us. All right, so what you'll notice is there's no shadow in this. Even though she's pretty close to the background, only a couple feet away, that light, because it's bounced, because it's so large, because it's so soft, there's no shadow at all. This is so helpful. If you're using a 3-foot Octa box, for example, to try to light in this space, that would be the main challenge you'd run into, is you'd be unable to light the background fully without getting a shadow of the subject. A couple other things to notice: if you look at the right-hand side of her face, there's some shadowing and sculpting. That's because we've pointed the light slightly to the left-hand side of the frame. So once again, where you angle it makes a huge difference. And then other than that, you'll notice that the shadows aren't really dark because my entire right-hand side over here is white and cream walls. So the light that bounces also bounces off of those walls and fills in the shadows. I could layer other lights into this scene, but I think for what I'm going for, I just want it to be soft and clean. So to get this shot, it's not about complicated lighting, but it's going to be interacting with my subject to get the right angles. So with that, let's get our shot. All right, so there you have it, two totally different approaches and different aesthetics shooting in a very small space. Here's the thing, I'm not trying to downplay the challenges that you faced, but any excuses that you make to not creating, it's just a barrier to yourself. A lot of people will say, I don't have enough lights, I don't have a large enough studio space, I don't have a big enough budget. But most photographers start with those challenges, and you become a better photographer when you work through them and you problem solve and still make beautiful images. That's how you grow, and it's stepping stones to becoming a bigger and more successful photographer. So if you want to see the gear that I use to make these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below, and of course, visit Adorama.com. And by the way, I have a monthly membership platform. Every single month I come out with a different theme. With that theme, we explore 6 different concepts within it, and I show the behind the scenes and lighting recipe guides. And I have one shot in this space dedicated specifically to shooting in small spaces. So I've linked to that in the description as well. All right, thanks everybody, and I will see you next time.